Guys, it's Dan here. In this week's episode we will talk about zombie companies. So in this video you will learn three things. First of all, what are zombie companies? Second of all, who are these zombie companies? And I will give you some very famous, surprising examples. And third of all, of course, we will talk about the why. Why do these zombie companies exist in the first place? That being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. To start this video, what are zombie companies? Well, let's look at the definition you will find on different websites on Google, and the definition is the following. So a zombie company is a company that just generates enough cash to pay interests on their loan, but they do not generate enough cash to pay the loan itself. Sounds a bit theoretical, sounds a bit complicated, especially if you don't really know financial statements. So I will show you an example here. Imagine you have a cash flow. So a cash flow shows you, is the company doing well or not? Is the company generating cash or is it burning cash? A company like Uber, for example, sounds super fancy, sounds super great and has great revenues, but is burning cash because the business model of Uber is not sustainable financially. So let's look at the cash flow and you will see what I mean by a zombie company. So let's imagine I have some cash ins of hundreds, which are basically my revenues. My clients paid me, so my revenues became cash ins. Okay, pretty simple. Then of course I have personal costs. You have to pay the people who work for me, right? So personal payouts of 30. Then of course I have some materials, because imagine I'm fabricating these amazing bottles here, okay? So of course I have some material costs. I have to pay my suppliers, so that's 20 gone. Pay taxes obviously, so that's gonna be, imagine it's 10. And then of course you still have to pay rent even in a pandemic, because of course office space is still rented, right? So you are paying rent here. So what does it mean if you take the 100 of cash ins minus all your outflows? You are left with an operating cash flow of 35. That means that this company here is generating plus 35 of operating cash flow, which is a good thing, okay? But then comes the problem, because the 35 of operating cash flow is completely gone after the interest payments. The company has so much debt and has so much interest to pay that the interests minus 35 consume the entire operating cash flow in this case, okay? So that means that at the end, after my interest payment, I have no more money, cash generation zero. Why is that such a big problem? Well, look at what is missing here. I have a cash generation of zero, meaning I'm making no money after my interest payment. But as you can see, I have not invested in the future and I have not paid back the principal of the debt. To explain you the difference between debt and interest, imagine you have a mortgage. You bought an apartment or a house or something like that. Inside your mortgage you have two things. Let's forget the insurance. You have two things. One part of the money is the principal you are paying back. Let's imagine you have borrowed $100,000, so on over 10 years or something. So imagine you're gonna pay back a little portion of the debt each month. Plus, of course, it's not for free, so you're gonna pay interest on it. So this is what's happening here. The only problem is a zombie company only has money left for interests. And why are the interests so high? Well, because the debt amount is piling up and up and up. It's a bit like you are refinancing your home all the time and you need more and more and more debt because you are only able to pay the interest with your salary. So this comes with two problems, of course. As I just mentioned, you are not able to invest because, well, the money is gone. So no money for research and development, for example, no money for future projects. And second of all, even much bigger problem, you don't have money even to pay back your debt. Big question, who are these companies? Are they big companies, small companies, and which countries? Well, I give you a few examples of zombie companies. So companies that are not able or are only able to pay the interests and not more. They are not able to pay their debt back. And you will be very surprised when you see their names. So here we go. First of all, Delta Airlines in the US, a huge American airline. Then of course we have Macy's, huge retail store business, very old school. And then of course also ExxonMobil, which is an oil company. So now you might be very surprised because we are talking about very famous brands, very big companies. So how is it possible and what happened actually? Well, you would say, yeah, it's the pandemic and stuff. Yeah, for sure, partly, but when you look at the stories, you will see it's a much older problem actually, because zombie companies really started in the 1990s in Japan, and with the bubble, everything exploded at the end of the 90s, and well, Japan understood the zombie firm problem. Now let's look at the US quickly. Delta Airlines, what is happening there? Why are they only making a little bit of money and not enough to pay back the huge debts? Well, basically it's competition here. As you know, all the airlines are facing huge competition from the Middle East, from US competitors and so on. And of course with the pandemic, the entire thing got worsened. So in my opinion, in the airline business, we will see a big concentration and some will definitely disappear here. Then Macy's, well, Macy's, very old school retailer. So when you look at Amazon, Alibaba and all the new Shopify businesses, it's not a surprise that you see a decline of Macy's and the name Macy's related to a zombie company, right? But then a very interesting example, and I was very surprised to see them in this category, it's actually ExxonMobil. Why is a company that makes huge profits in the oil industry, or was making huge profits before the pandemic, why are they a zombie company? Why are they only able to pay back their interests and not their debt? Well, that's a pretty interesting strategy, because of course you need a lot of money in the oil business to grow, to keep your market shares and so on, but this is not the problem here. With ExxonMobil, it's all about dividends. ExxonMobil is what is called a dividend stock, so people who buy a dividend stock are expecting recurring yields every year, so they're expecting to get a dividend each year from this company, no matter if the company is making money or not. And this is a big problem for ExxonMobil, because of course if you have a year like 2020 where you are not making money or not enough, you still have to pay dividends. So what is happening in ExxonMobil's case is they continue to pay the same recurring dividend each year, or even sometimes increasing it, even if they are not profitable. And what happens is actually they are borrowing money from the banks and from the financial markets to pay out dividends to the investors. So this is kind of a very controversial model here, which explains why ExxonMobil is part of the zombie companies who are not able to pay back their debt, which is piling up more and more. So now you might say, okay, but all these three examples are very much related to the pandemic. I'm showing you a graph and you will see it's pretty interesting that, of course, when you look at the debt that has been amassed over the years, you see that 2020 with the pandemic, the obligations, so the debt of these zombie firms is about $2 trillion, which is a huge amount, obviously. And but you can see that even before 2020, so in 2019, it was still half. So it was about $1 trillion, which is $1,000 billion. So you see, we're not talking about a small problem here, but we're talking about a huge zombification of companies, and that's kind of a big problem. Now let's talk about the reasons why zombie companies even exist, because it's kind of a strange situation here, especially in a capitalistic society like in the US. You could ask yourself, okay, but in capitalism, if I read the theories, or if you went maybe to college or school, people will always tell you, well, capitalism is the survival of the fittest, right? Especially for companies. Meaning, if you are very profitable, you will dominate the market, or at least keep your market share, right? And if you're not dominant, or if you are non-profitable, you will run out of cash at some point and you will die. This is just how it works usually in capitalism. Then of course you add debt to it and it changes a little bit the game, right? So now let's look at zombie companies, the why behind it, and what's the reason how they can survive actually? Well, there are two main reasons. First of all, the intervention of central banks. What do central banks do? Well, they can print money if it's necessary. They can lower rates if it's also necessary. Goal is always growth. Okay, when a country is struggling, the central bank, for example, in the U.S., will lower the interest rates, which will make it cheaper to borrow money. So if you already have a lot of debt, it's still gonna be cheaper. You will pay more interest rates than a fit company, but you can still have access to capital. You can still have access to debt because there is so much money in the market and it's so cheap to borrow that you can still survive thanks to the central bank and its policy, right? The second very important aspect is government bailouts and stimulus packages. Bailouts was more like used especially in 2008 with the banks, the too big to fail situation, right? But also with everything which is strategic like airlines or everything related to national security. It doesn't matter how bad these companies perform, they will always be saved and bailed out by the government usually, right? Airlines are a great example. Look at Alitalia in Italy or Air France in France, which have like a kind of a national symbol. Well, I don't know why, but the government always saves them, right? And then of course you have stimulus packages, which is more like the 2020, 2021 topic. In a huge crisis like this, the government pumps out a lot of money that will of course impact future generations. But right now there is so much money in the market that even bad companies or non-profitable companies can get free or cheap money, and this again is great for zombie companies because it's also a great way to survive. Why are governments doing it? Of course, in this case of when you look at bailouts and stimulus packages, the goal is clearly here to save jobs. You want to save companies like Boeing or different airlines because you want to keep the jobs. The big question is, wouldn't it be better maybe to just let the company die and pay the workers until they find a new job? This is what happened in the US, especially in 2020. Now with the new stimulus package, a lot of zombie companies like the airlines are still able to easily make it through a very difficult time, and without it and probably in the future they would have died anyway. Let's quickly talk about the big issue I have with zombie companies. The problem with zombie companies, and a lot of people don't get it, they think they're just supporting the zombie companies through tough times, for example. The problem with zombie companies is they do not invest in the long term. They do not invest in R&D and these kind of things. Why not? Because they just don't have the cash. They need the cash they have generated to pay back the interests, and then are not even able to touch or to pay back the loans, right? So it's not even conceivable that they will invest in the long term. That means, of course, if you're not investing in the long term, you will lose market share, of course, so you will not grow for sure, right? What does it mean if you do not invest and if you do not grow? Well, guess what? You will never pay back your debt. And that's a big problem because the debt, especially in bailouts and its stimulus packages, who is paying the debt for these companies? Well, it's you, it's me, it's all of us, the taxpayer, right? So that's a very important thing. And this is the last point is very important as well, because companies, or especially in social countries like France, I'm French by the way, people think it's a good way to save companies because it saves jobs. But the problem is, in the long run, it's a pretty bad strategy, because these loser companies, they will not create jobs in the long run. Maybe they will keep a few for a little bit longer, as long as they can, but they will definitely not create jobs. Why? Because they have not invested, they are not growing, and they have to pay back their debt, which they will never do. So of course they will not create jobs. So this is the big issue with zombie companies. So now I wanted to let you know, did you know about zombie companies? What do you think about it? Do you think we have to support these kind of companies? Do you think we have to let them die and just save the employees by paying them more benefits, for example, and unemployment money? So let me know what you think about this. Otherwise, I wanted to let you know, I post once a week every Sunday, so if you like that kind of corporate finance, market finance content, make sure to subscribe, of course, make sure to like. Takes me about 6-7 hours to produce. I wanted to let you know, otherwise enjoy your week, stay safe, stay smart. See you soon guys, bye bye.